The first report this evening is going to be the Pupil Enrollment Projection Study for 2017 through 2021. Mrs. Egan?
Thank you. Good evening, Mrs. Kleida, Dr. Johns, members of the board. The district has utilized the services of Plant Moran Cressa to provide enrollment projections for 2017 through 2021 to assist in facility use and financial projections. The validity of the Plant Moran Cressa enrollment projections is recognized by the Michigan Department of Treasury. Mr. Paul Wills, partner from Plant Moran Cressa, will be presenting the Pupil Enrollment Projections Study Report for the 2017 through 2021 period, including the impact of national, state, and local trends. Mr. Wills,
good evening, and Mrs. Kleida, Dr. Johnson, board members. We're here to again present the update for the Pupil Projection Report for 2017. So real quickly, Plant Moran Cressa, we are one of the demographers recognized by the Department of Treasury. We have done this for the last 20 years for multitude of districts across the state of Michigan. And we're actually here to present some of the trends, as Ms. Egan mentioned, what's happening in the state, what's happening in Macomb, and more specifically, what is happening here in Utica Community Schools. Districts utilize this information for a plethora of information. One is obviously for financial planning. So again, you have your fall count and your spring count. These are audited by the state, and ultimately that's how the districts are receiving the majority of their funding for the fiscal year. They also use it for utilization, facility planning, enrollments, et cetera. So going forward, we're here again to present that to the board and go forward. Some of our clients are, yes, yep. There we go. Some of our clients are from A to Z, from Ann Arbor all the way down to Zeeland and everywhere else in between. But more importantly, we take a look at collectively what has been the accuracy or the conservative approach to these districts going forward. So one of the things we've done is provide some of your peer districts for comparison. And what I'd like to point out is the fourth column from the right is Utica Community Schools, which does show about 180 student loss from last year to this year. One of the things that we've noticed in the past is you've lost roughly 2,000 students, really since the 2006, 2007, 2008 school year. So why is that? So one of the trends that we look at is what's happening in the United States. So on the upper left-hand side, you'll see kind of the trends of birth rates. In 2010-11, it was the lowest birth rate ever on record, as tracked by the Pew Research Institute. They've been tracking it since 1920. If you look at the lower left, that's actually the state of Michigan, really since 1940. And the top of that peak, if you will, is 1958, where the state had about 212,000 live births that year. That was the height of the baby boom going forward. The last major peak we had was really in 1990. That's that secondary peak. And really from then, you've seen a downward trend throughout the state of Michigan. The lower right-hand side is Macomb, and we're going to dive in a little bit of that deeper later in the presentation. But you can kind of see that downward trend and starting to basically kind of level off to a downward trend, if you will, going forward. So how does Plant Moran Cressa provide enrollment projections? So again, we look at your student enrollment projection reports that are audited again by the state. We take a look at the live births, which are actually audited by the Department of Community Health. We also take a look at what are those trends or demographics that's occurring within the district. Very similar to other demography types, instead of the 1 mile, 3 mile, or 5 mile radius, we can actually draw the district's boundaries. And we're going to review some of that information and what it relates to housing, age of households, the number of students per household going forward, and some of those. So again, it's really a 4-point approach, which then allows us to present the projections that we're going to see this evening. So the red polygon, this is the district's boundaries, and again, this does cover multiple municipalities, but again, this is all the information that we'd pull from a demographic trend from that. So again, we're looking at geographical information systems. We utilize a thing called ESRI, which is basically environmental sourcing, plus Nielsen Claritas. So if you watch TV or on the internet, our corporate clients, we're buying a lot of that information for their use, but again, we're here to present some of those specifics. We do compare Utica Community Schools to Macomb County, as well as the state of Michigan, and look at some of those similarities or differences. As I mentioned, your reporting forms for the state of Michigan. Last year, we did do an update relative to housing. I know that sometimes you'll hear a lot of comments of there just seems to be a plethora of building going around the different municipalities. We've had a chance to reach out basically to majority townships, Shelby, Macomb. Those are from 2014 to 2016. By comparison, if you were to look at the single family, now these are all single family residential, so this combines detached, it includes condominiums, it includes multi-housing. So to give you an example, in Shelby Township in 2016, even though there was 284 total residential permits, only 111 of those were for a single family home. So again, more of apartments and multi-type families. And we'll get in a little bit about what that means from a pupil enrollment standpoint going forward. So again, the question is, we have a decline of birth rate, the number of homes that we're looking at, is there a possibility of potentially outbuilding that decrease? And the answer is no, and we'll get into that here shortly. So one of the things we're able to do is do kind of a 5-year look back to 2010. We took a look at a snapshot of 2016 and able to project out to the 2021. One of the things you'll note is that there's a 2.2% decrease at 0 to 5, and you'll see that in the birth rate when we kind of get to that subsequent slide. We are taking a look. We do anticipate some housing transitions within the district, specifically greater transitions at the south end of the district than compared to the north. So there's a slight, I'll call it increase over the next 5 years, really at that middle school to high school. But what we're really looking at is more of intra-district housing type transitions versus subdivisions where we're building 200, 300, or 400 new homes. For 18 to 24-year-olds, there's a 5.1% increase. So mom and dad, the kids that have graduated in the next 4 to 5 years may either be living at home or staying within that red boundary, commuting to school, working, et cetera. So again, these are the different age cohorts that we look at from a trending for the next 5 years. We take a look at the number of families, and also more importantly, what is the median age? So Utica Community Schools is in a very mature, we'd consider demographic area. The average or the median household age is 52.6. So again, taking a look at some of those other districts around southeast Michigan that would potentially be growing, South Lyon and Novi, Northville, that's typically in the higher 30s or lower 40s. And again, they're seeing more of that younger transition of housing stock, where here we have a 52.6 age median for the district in that boundary. We take a look also at what is the public versus private. Utica Community Schools continues to be a destination district. You capture roughly 90% of the public that choose public schools, about 9.13% choose private. Macomb County is about the same, about 90, 91%. The state average is actually about 89%, with 11% choosing private. Some other districts that we do work with, that number could be as high as 18 or even up to 22%, depending on the number of private choices and things of that nature going forward. So the population trends, again, this is all students within that red boundary. Again, the lower, on the bottom, you'll see the blue diamonds. That is that 0 to 5, so again, that's your anticipated cohort for incoming kindergarten. Again, if you take a look at the 6 to 11-year-olds, again, that is reflecting a lot of that housing transition. But we're only talking about 200 or 300 type student from that time frame as they matriculate into high school. And then high school is really the 12 to 17, that's the green triangles, and again, there's a downward trend on that for the next 5 years going forward. We talked a little bit about Macomb County relative to the live births. This is actually a live birth chart from 1990. And one of the things you'll notice is in 2000, it was really the high birth rate of just over 10,300 births. Really this past year, you were just over 9,000. So again, you take a decrease of that time frame, and that would explain a lot of the 2,000 loss since that time frame. Again, going back to the number of households, it's about 0.42 kids per housing unit. So again, if you had to capture that gap of 2,000 decrease, you're looking at roughly 4,000 homes that would have to be built K-12 to really fill that gap, which obviously based on those permit numbers, we just don't see that occurring going forward. So we take a look at the residents. This next chart, it is a little difficult to read, I know, on the screen. You should have a hard copy or maybe up on your laptops. So one of the things we did want to point out, the way this chart works is on the upper 3 rows is the birth year, the number of births, and the K percentage of births that are captured by Utica Community Schools. So in 2005 birth year, which relates to the 2010-2011 school year, there was 10,009 births, if everyone sees that. Utica Community Schools captured 18.16. So again, this is all historical data, that thick black line, everything left is historical. If you fast forward to that red circle that we've captured, you've actually gone up to about 19.9% So you're capturing almost 2% more of those students. The problem is there's 1,000 less of them being born. Also from this chart, you'll see that we call this the cohorts percentages. So underneath those numbers of each of the grades, the percentage below that is actually the increase of students. So if it's a 1.1% or 101% or 102%, that would show you that percentage of growth from the previous year. The good news is you have experienced some growth at or additional cohorting at 6th grade, 7th grade, 8th grade, even to 9th grade, which again is a great testament to the programs that Utica Community Schools offers to maintain and capture those students going forward. Looking out to the 21-22 school year, inclusive of adult or alternative education and special education, we anticipate Utica's community schools to be right around 27,800 students. So again, the good news, 18% capture up to almost 19.9 or 20%. The challenge that the district's going to have is, even though your enrollment's relatively flat with somewhat downward trending at the 0 to 5, your operational costs are going to continue to go up. The state aid funding, as you're probably well aware of, also is not keeping up. So those would be the challenges to keep in mind as a board and administration as you look at your enrollment projections going forward. Taking this chart, really putting it more into a graphical format, this is a little bit easier to read. So again, the blue diamonds, that's the K4s, K6s across the top. You'll see that downward trend. And then again, really leveled off at the 7, 9, and the 10, 12s. And the red dash line is really just a 3-year moving trend to get you that total enrollment going forward. So again, kind of a summary for both the trends and the enrollment summaries. Yes, the community, as Macomb, is going up. Coincidentally, there was a report that was issued out of the 21 plus districts. Only 3% or 3 districts actually showed an increase over the last 5 years. And that range was from 1% to 2%. So we're not talking extensive amounts of growth. The average in the county over the last 5 years is actually right around 4 to 5% loss percentage point. From last year to this year, we talked a little bit about our conservative approach or accuracy. We're right around 99.3% this year, 99.7% last year. So again, from a conservative approach, we feel pretty confident with some of the numbers we're projecting at this time. And at that point, I'll turn it back over to Mrs. Kleider and Dr. Johns.
Thank you very much. You gave us this report here in this room last year, and your news isn't any better than it was last year, unfortunately. And I think sometimes we have a misconception about what it looks like to, out in the public. You see building, you see that. But for those of us who've been around a while, you said 0.42?
Correct.
Children per household is what you estimate. 15 years ago and 10 years ago and maybe even 20 years ago, was that the same number?
No, it was actually significantly higher, almost 1 per housing unit. So again, that was the large growth you saw in the 90s, which I even go back to some of those birth years, that direct correlation, and a lot of that subdivision you purchased going forward. So
maybe just for clarity for the public, could you explain what you refer to as, I believe, a transition housing?
Sure.
So they can kind of get an understanding of what you're trying to say about how we're moving and how we're growing. Sure. With the transition and the others.
So we are seeing about a 1.5% total growth within that red boundary, really K through 12. But what's happening is people that moved into the district at the elementary level, again, the economy's picking up. People are choosing to stay within Utica Community Schools, which is great, and they're moving upstream or upwards in terms of the housing stock, if you will. So maybe an entry level 5, 10, 15 years ago, they have middle school or even high schoolers. They're transitioning into those homes, either staying, obviously staying within the district, but more importantly, kind of transitioning up into the north end of the district where, let's say, there's larger homes. People can afford those types of homes. It's your second or third type home. That's the trend that we're seeing.
So we're not gaining students, even though people think we're growing it in a different area of the district.
Correct. It's more of we call it intra-district moving.
Right.
We do see that again with communities that are well matured and they have great programs and great schools. They kind of want to stay.
But it explains why there's new housing starts, yet we are not growing. Does anyone else have any questions? Dr. Ross?
Ms. Claddy? Yeah. So we ultimately here in a few months in June are going to have to adopt a budget based on 2 numbers we don't know, which is our enrollment and the state aid foundation grant. And looking at the data that you present, I mean, is there really any way that we could expect there to be a large uptick in the enrollment? Is there any reasonable possibility that that's going to happen?
No, actually, our main concern would obviously be the opposite. So with interest rates for residential mortgages anticipating going up, that's something that you'd see less of that housing transition type into the district potentially. I mean, then if you take a look at just the 0 to 5, I mean, you're still at a almost a 3% loss over the next 5 years. So that's going to be the main challenge is your incoming kindergarten class to your outgoing senior class. There's a pretty big delta there that we're just not seeing you be able to change that up from any.
And that result, is, as you mentioned, is not the fact that people are voting with their feet and not attending UCS. We're capturing about the same percentage, actually a little bit higher.
Yeah, actually, I was going to say,
before.
I do want to actually thank Mr. Bernier and Ms. Egan for their information as well. So, I mean, you do have a school of choice population, which does indicate you are a destination district. You have a significant amount of individuals who are interested in attending the schools. So, again, maintaining that type of academic programs is helping you attract those students. But, again, when you have 21 districts in Macomb County and 18 of them have all lost students, there's just less of that pot. So that'll be the challenge is how do you offset that? And unfortunately, residential housing will not be the solution for you to come.
Thank you.
I think I want to just make one more thing, just reiterate one more time that the median age of the population in Utica Community Schools District is 52.
52.6, yes.
Right. And I think that's very telling, as it was 20 years ago. It was not.
Correct.
Okay.
Mrs. Clydo, if I may.
Yes, please, Dr. Jones.
Mr. Wills, let's revisit. In 2006, were at the height of our enrollment. Last year, when you reported to the board, you talked about that we were in declining enrollment, and we would continue to see that decline projected out. There's a slight change this year in the enrollment, in that even though we are still below the levels from our high point in 2006, the fact of the matter is that we will watch over the next couple years, at least it being stable. So that's good news, even though we are still down from where we are, and we're still, we're not losing as many students.
Correct. We often get asked, where's the bottom? So one of the things we take a look at is the live births, again, kind of audited. So again, you're looking at that 18 to 20% capture rates. Consistently, you've been increasing that year to year at the kindergarten level, which is great. But again, if you take a look at 1998, 99, 2000, 2001, that's your current high school population. And when you take that bar and you move it here on the chart, and I think on the chart you see in front of you, there's just a significantly less, really the county's lost 35,000 students in 5 years across all districts. And so, obviously being a larger district or second largest in the state, you've seen that a lot more than, let's say, some of your neighbors who are much, much smaller. But again, the same challenges of, we do see that kind of leveling off at the bottom, but we don't see, as Dr. Ross inquired, we don't see any growth that's going to be able to outgrow that enrollment, if you will, to offset any operational cost increases that you may experience. So.
If no one else has anything else, thank you, Mr. Wells, for your
Thank you.
report. It is very helpful when we go on to do other decisions, so thank you very much for
Thank you.
being here again.
Yeah, Mrs. Clyde, if I may, the importance of capturing the elementary, particularly at kindergarten, more students, even though we're not capturing, because of birth, what we previously have sitting in our 12th grades. I really do want to thank our principals and Mr. Bernier, because I know there's lots of work going in to continue to keep our public informed about the quality of schools and working with families so that, in a very timely way, so that their first choice is Utica Community Schools through the Schools of Choice program. Mr. Bernier has done a fantastic job with that, so thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Johns.